The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon and welcome back to The Left versus the Right. I'm David Patterson, and I couldn't be more delighted this afternoon than to have as my broadcasting partner, a man I see just about every day of the week, Richard Weinberg, the judge. Your Honor, thank you for coming back.
Excellency, I'm happy to be here with you.
And as nice as it's been for the last whatever hours, we're now in spring. But interestingly enough, there's a very serious issue, I believe, going on internationally, and it has to do with the accusation that President Trump has made that our allies, the ones that always tell us they're going to be with us, aren't doing anything. He called them cowards, and he said that Iran is continuing to try to build a nuclear facility. No one other than ourselves has got the intestinal fortitude to put a stop to that. And, at first, it might, kind of sound like the president, going off on a little tangent, as he is.
He's been known to do that on occasion.
Been known to do that, right? But in this situation, I think he really has a point that you've got these countries, they have been living literally off of us for decades. And now a big issue comes up that we wind up right in the middle, and they are nowhere to be found. They couldn't even have a meeting last week because 3 or 4 of the countries found some other thing to do than send their representatives that day. How far and how dangerous do you think this could become?
You're talking about the fracturing of the alliance between the United States and these European countries?
Exactly.
Well, let's put a context to this. There's no doubt in my mind that Iran never learned the lesson of last summer. They were trying to rebuild the nuclear facilities. They certainly were building up their drone and their ballistic missile capacity. They were still funding terrorist groups. That's all verified by the intelligence community and by our satellites, which showed the pictures of all this going on. Clearly, this is a necessary war. The Democrats, our party, seem to have lost their brains and their courage. They're saying, well, the threat wasn't imminent. When has it become imminent, Governor, when the ballistic missiles are over San Francisco or over Los Angeles, right, or over Manhattan or over Washington, D.C.? And there's no requirement as a matter of law or public policy or morality that you have to wait for the other guy to punch you in the face before you make sure he doesn't punch you in the face.
It's not who throws the first punch, it's who throws the last one.
And it's a very clear message that Mr. Trump is not Mr. Obama and not Mr. Biden, that he's a real leader, he has real courage, he doesn't suffer from moral weakness, intellectual weakness, or courage. He's doing what has to be done. This is a necessary war, because what are you going to wait for them to build up their armaments to such an extent that they now have a checkmate over the international community? You see what they're doing now, Governor, without a nuclear weapon. Can you imagine if these people had a nuclear weapon? They're attacking their fellow Muslims in the Arab countries.
They were long since already used it.
Of course, because remember, and everybody says, well, you have mutually assured deterrence. Let me set the record straight on that, Governor.
Please.
They don't have mutually assured deterrence.
And thank you.
This is a death cult. This is a religious obsession that they believe that they're going to heaven if they kill enough people, and it doesn't matter what happens here. Everything will be just swell. They don't care if they wipe out the world. The Russians and the Chinese have always understood that they don't want to go to so-called heaven. They'd still rather stay right here and be alive and well. So the answer is, while we once had mutually assured deterrence with respect to those adversaries, and even today, It's not the case with respect to this death cult, which are religious obsessives.
Now, I want to just turn the conversation a little to talk about what you just mentioned. Rationally, we're all human beings on this planet. We have brains and we have feelings. How could it be possible spiritually to reward anybody for taking the life of another person? And how could anybody benefit from the fact that they have destroyed families, harmed individuals, threatened large groups of people, sometimes when they have half of the weaponry they would actually need to execute it, and the rest of the world seems unwilling to challenge and to support that notion that the president is describing just yesterday?
I think your point earlier is right. How come the Europeans have not faced up to the realities of the power struggle that's going on? They've gotten soft. They've gotten weak. They've been invaded by an open border policy that's allowed people to come in here to those countries, whether it's France, whether it's England, whether it's Italy, whether it's Germany, the Netherlands, people who do not share common values, the culture, have no tolerance for different religions other than their own. Have no man land where they cannot believe in allowing the police to regulate and maintain law and order and public safety. They're weak-kneed, they're foolish. And by the way, the big issue that we're talking about today is what's to be done. Well, who's the beneficiary in the first instance of this war against evil? But the first instance is the Middle East itself, and the Middle East has rallied around. The Arab countries have gone from the Abraham Accord to the Abraham Alliance. They've rallied around President Trump and what's doing. They've supporting the joint venture between Israel and the United States to take down this terrorist regime. The Europeans, the beneficiaries of our largesse and our military protection, have made themselves social welfare states where they don't spend the money on their own military protection. They are under the umbrella of our military protection. They spend all this money that should be going into their budgets to protect themselves. What do? More social welfare programs, And politically, they're afraid to make a move against Iran because of their domestic populations, which have strong populations that are very suspect.
A long time ago, when I was a history major at Columbia, I never understood this term, the Allies, because what it seemed to me occurred was that the United States basically took out Germany, took out Italy, and did most of the work. And then at the very end, when there were celebrations and marches and that type of thing, we talked about the Allies. And I was wondering, even then, I'm 18 or 19 years old, well, who are the Allies? The French didn't do anything to help. The British basically folded, for the first time in a millennium. And one wonders, have they learned anything since then in the interim 85 years that would really allow them to think that these positions that they're taking and their clear desire not to be part of anything that would where anybody would get killed or hurt. I mean, this is the world as it is today. And a lot of these countries, starting with Iran and, of course, others in their little group, got a lot of their chutzpah to go and do this stuff from the inaction of allegedly our friends.
Look, they need a reality check. The reality check is that Islamist fundamentalism, a hegemonic death cult that believes that they have a right to subjugate other peoples to their values, their cultures, their religious beliefs. And if you don't succumb and adhere to them, they have an absolute right to kill you, literally kill you, to do so. If they don't think this is a threat, I don't know what a threat is. And the problem is that they've been under our umbrella of protection. The only people who are doing the right thing to protect Western civilization at this point in time are Israel and the United States. Now, Israel is a true ally. They've put blood, money, people's lives have been lost in Israel because of this. They've been fighting the war against Islamist terrorism. When Netanyahu went to a joint session of Congress and addressed the Congress and warned all those many years ago during the Obama administration about this existential threat to Western civilization, Obama's reaction was to be annoyed, to be angry. But he was speaking the truth. And when they did this ridiculous deal, the so-called nuclear deal,
right,
which was supposed to be a check on their aspirations, in fact, it was a pathway to get nuclear weaponry. And all the money, the hidden money that was given to them, they used to fund their terrorist networks and to build up their atomic capacity, to the nuclear capacity to wage war. And they spent the rest of the money helping terrorist groups arm themselves and have terror acts all across the world. They sent out political operators all across Europe and indeed the United States to undermine and create fifth columns in various countries. They allowed themselves and their allies to build underground shelters for their armaments. They kept saying they only wanted nuclear power for peaceful uses. So then tell me, why are you building drones and ballistic missiles? Why are you doing research and getting a ballistic missile that can go all the way from Iran to California? Where's the peaceful intention there? And when Trump, in this last round of negotiations, offered them and said, we'll give you all the nuclear power you want to take care of your energy needs, they turned it down, and they bragged to Witkoff in the discussions they had enough for nuclear material to build 11 atomic bombs. And that's when Witkoff woke up and went back to Trump and he said, you know what? These guys really are out of their minds. And this is a game of delay, delay, delay. And by the way, I want to make this point. People keep saying, you have some idiot members of the Senate, like Kane, as an example, from Virginia, or Murphy from Connecticut. They say it wasn't imminent. And I say again, what does imminent mean? When it's at your doorstep and you can barely respond? The fact of the matter is you have to fight them when you're strong and they're weaker. The more time you jerked around, wasting time with these foolish negotiations, the more drones they were making, the more ballistic missiles they were making, the more they were arming their satellite terrorist operation. Your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. And when it is articulated as brilliantly as you just described, you wonder, what is it that these people are thinking about? We're talking about a couple of United States senators. We're talking about a number of congressional representatives, a lot of them Democrats, who seem to be, idling while Rome is burning. And I don't know what's so difficult about failing to understand that the reputations and the conduct of some of these countries that we've described is not only outrageous, but it is occurring whenever they get a few minutes to breathe. Because otherwise, every time there's been a confrontation, things haven't worked out very well for them. So the idea that the United States president gets in front of it and takes the problem right to their doorstep, and they still don't get it. They ignore him as if they think he's...
They say Obama and Biden?
Exactly.
Well, look at the most recent threat that was made by Iran. Remember, they've attacked their own Muslim co-religionists all over the Middle East.
They sure have.
And they've killed people there. They've hit hotels, hospitals, schools, energy facilities. They're doing everything possible to try to convince Trump by using pressure against these Arab states to get the Arab states to say enough, to cry uncle, so to force Trump to give it up. Trump is not going to give it up, I hope. That would be a serious mistake, because if this regime, Governor, is allowed to survive, they will come back again and again and again. That's their ideology. That's their commitment. That's their worldview. This regime has to be replaced. If it's not replaced, we're in serious trouble. The latest threat, I don't know if you saw this, I was reading it today, and I said, my God. So one of the senior generals said, well, no place is now safe. We're going to go after your tourist spots without identifying that.
Yesterday, they were reporting that all afternoon that the Iranians have basically said they're going to start attacking amusement parks, hotels, places where people are found during their leisure time, and
innocent civilians.
And they came right out and said it.
Right. So they announced that they're doing a war crime in advance. They've already committed the war crimes against the civilian population of the Arab countries, and certainly against Israel. These are people who had open contracts against the President of the United States and made attempts to take him out, against a former Secretary of State, Pompeo, against a former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, against members of Congress and the Senate and other senior-level advisors to the presidency. They had open contracts on these people. And this is people that you're allowed to continue in power. It's shocking that you'd even think about allowing them to stay in power.
Sure. Now, I'm going to flip the script a little bit here and have a conversation with you about where do people hatch these ideas? You know, obviously, somewhere in the caverns of their brain, they get this idea that this would be the best thing for them to do. They have no concept really about history, in the sense that of the last great civilizations that would have considered to have been dominant around the world, and there were 20 of them that I've read about. 18 of them inevitably collapsed. 2 were the leadership changed because of a war. The other 18 collapsed from within. And so what I think, we have to be careful about is that here in this country, there doesn't seem to be the type of unanimity that you would think would have existed, let's say, right after September 11th. We were pretty much united. And what we're going to do is take a little break. And after that, Your Honor, I'm going to leave it in your hands. But because the idea is, what is it that we were willing to do about 25 years ago, I hate to say anniversary, but that date, September 11th, will be the 25th September 11th since 2001. But when we come back, I want you to talk about just the psychology of these international countries that don't seem to really understand how serious this problem is. I'm David Patterson with Richard Weinberg. We're on the left versus the right. We don't seem to be having too much derision between the two of us. But
that's because we're both centrist, common sense Democrats.
Exactly. And we'll be right back.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though. I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
The left versus the right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on the left versus the right. Hope you're enjoying this program on this Saturday afternoon. The first day of spring, Your Honor. It's the first day of blooming flowers and the first day of peace and tranquility. There's nothing like spring. It's a rebirth.
I'm all for that. I'm all for rebirth. I'm all for peace and tranquility.
But I'm feeling it.
Where's the peace and
however
tranquility?
Coming. Go right ahead.
So let's take it from where we left off. What's going on with the foreign powers who don't realize that this is a fight that's being fought to protect them? For example, the Strait of Hormuz. You know who gets the oil from that strait? Not the Americans. Not the Americans at all.
No, you're right. And I'm
it's
just
the Europeans who get the benefit of that, and
exactly.
China gets it.
Exactly.
So give me a break, and they won't even. They announce they'll send a battleship or an aircraft carrier after we've won. That'll be very helpful. And they need to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and unless they realize that's absolutely essential, they allowing these other people to checkmate the world economy and to destroy it. And the Saudis stupidly just said, well, if the war doesn't end soon, you'll have a $180 barrel of oil. Guess what? This is not a war of choice by the United States and by Israel. This is a war of necessity. And if they had nuclear weapons, you could damn sure that they will do whatever they have to blackmail Europe into doing what they want Europe to do.
Exactly.
So now let's flash to a different part of this discussion. What is it about the people of the United States today that they still support the president, the majority, over 60% support? The Republicans are totally in line, with the exception of the lunatic right-wing fringe led by Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, Nick Fuentes, Megyn Kelly.
Megyn Kelly, right.
People like that. I have to tell you, but the base of the Republican Party supports him, and even a large percentage of Democrats support him.
On this issue, without a doubt.
And it's necessary. But yet, why is there a group that seems to oppose him? Well, the Democrats oppose him just because they suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. And the young people who don't like Trump, do not understand history, have no knowledge of history, do not understand the threat, think socialism is just wonderful, and there are no problems with socialism, even though human experience has shown it fails everywhere.
And every time.
Every time, and at the cost of tens of millions and hundreds of millions of lives. People's lives have been destroyed, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's North Korea, whether it's Cambodia, whether it's Vietnam, wherever it's raised, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, wherever it's raised its ugly heads, communism / radical socialism, they've destroyed human dignity, freedom of opportunity, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And this is what is being pushed by the far left in the Democratic Party. And they're isolationists, so let it happen. And then on the right wing of the Republican Party, you have these fools, the Tucker Carlson wing, who are going after Trump for protecting Western civilization. Trump understands what has to be done, and I don't agree with him all the time, but on this one, he's absolutely correct.
Well, about 78 years ago, there was a man who very much made the public feel that he had their concerns at the top of his list and got himself elected. and completely, right before everybody's very eyes, changed and started to dominate all of Europe. And who knows, had things been different, perhaps expanded this rule all around the globe. And of course, his name is Adolf Hitler. My question to you is, people run for office. I'm one of them. And you get into office, and then you start thinking about what it is you'd like to accomplish. But then you have these people who run for office. It almost appears to me as if they just want to be there. They just want to be in office, after which they don't really do much of anything. President Carter, it was toward the end of his first term, but that's when the whole conflict arose in 1979.
79.
And so he really just whimpering left out of office. He didn't take any strong position at all. President Ronald Reagan came in, and that situation was turned around rather quickly. You've had other presidents like, and I hate to say it, but President Obama, I voted for him, and he comes into office, and I don't know, did he have like a great aunt who was Iranian or something? Because he always seemed to be wanting to make these deals with Iran, and he always thought that Iran would honor them. And he went out of office really without anybody fearing anything that he was going to do. And my question to you is just psychologically, why do human beings, and between the two of us, we know a lot of them, take the time out, they raise money, they go visit different neighborhoods to get support, they get an office, they're able to expand it. Some of them become statewide authorities because they become the governor of their states. But when a real crisis comes up, they fade in such a way that you wonder how they got there in the first place.
Human nature being what it is, people want a free ride. Very few people really have a real strong moral compass or a real strong work ethic. That's been my experience. They want the benefits of prosperity. They don't want to work for it. Europe is filled with people who have lunch all day and they go for a siesta. I mean, which is not exactly the most productive thing you can do with your time. In terms of running for office and holding office, I've been blessed with a lack of ambition to run for or hold elective office. I've been fortunate in my career to be appointed.
And if I might say, by some of the very well-regarded elected officials, such as the former Speaker of the City Council, Peter Vallone, and that combination of the two of you did a lot for the city when you were working during the term of Mayor Koch, right?
We worked. We had Koch, we had Dinkins, and we had Giuliani. We had all three of them. Look, Peter Vallone had a moral compass. He had a sense of what the right thing to do was. He loved the city. He wanted to protect and defend the city. We dealt with economic crisis. We dealt with social crisis. We dealt with crisis of public safety, and we addressed it with courage and hopefully wisdom. The future generations were the beneficiary of that. The problem is the population of the city today is more than half the people have no idea what you're talking about the bad old days of Dave, do something, there's no law and order, the violence that was going on. It was Vallone. Right. It was Vallone and the city council who led the way for Safe Streets, Safe City, even though David Dinkins took credit for when he ran for re-election against Giuliani. But frankly, it was Vallone who forced it down Dinkins' throat to make sure we had the cops to do the job. And when Dinkins wanted to raise taxes, we said, we're in a recession. You don't raise taxes in a recession.
And it's amazing because there was this understanding at least I thought at some point, that these people could work together. But when Dinkins in particular, and he's a very good friend of mine, he married my wife and I, and was always a close friend, always gave me very good advice. But for some reason, he just didn't seem to want to put himself out there and let everybody know, I'm going to put a stop to this.
Well, you asked the question about people wanting the office, but when they're there, they don't seem to understand that they have a responsibility. When you take an office, whether it's elected or appointed, you have a responsibility to do the best job you can using the best sense of ethics and effort that you can make to serve the larger public good. It's what, if you look at back to Thucydides and Pericles' funeral oration, it's all about subsuming your private interest to the larger public good. And David, who was a nice enough person, and I knew David at City Hall. I knew him when he was the borough president of Manhattan and later the mayor of the city. David really had missed the boat. He didn't understand the crisis that the city was in. But thankfully, he had a deputy mayor, former Judge Milton Mullen, who understood we were in a public safety crisis. Something had to be done. And Judge Mullen and I and others, senior staff of the mayor, senior staff of the city council, worked with the leadership of the council and the leadership of the legislature and the governor to get a bill through, later known as Safe Streets, Safe City. And that made all the difference. That turned the city around. That saved the city. If we hadn't done that, the city would have been lost. We gave Giuliani the army to bring back law and order and public safety.
Absolutely. We're sitting here. It's a Saturday afternoon. It's the first complete day of spring. We're having this conversation. And I'm going to pretend that there are no microphones. I'm just going to talk to you as the friend of mine that you've been and tell you that when I got into office, I made decisions, to be honest with you, where I was afraid not to make them. In other words, when I realized how they had fudged the budget deficit when I first came in, and I realized how in that first budgetary year 2009, 2010, that we were going to wind up significantly further in debt than we were. That was the reason why I decided that I was going to challenge the legislature, that if they did not go along with this, that all these programs they want to do and these other issues, that I wasn't going to do them, made me the most unpopular man in Albany, at least at the time, because the same people, I see them now, you really stood up during that time. And I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I did, but where were you at that time? I didn't say that, but, there's something that I've never quite figured out, because almost every year there are a stream of candidates at my door. I want to be the next mayor. I want to be the next governor. I want to do this, that, and the other thing. But I don't feel the commitment in the person's voice. What I feel is someone who would like to top off their resume.
Yeah, they want to buy themselves a title. They want to show off a title. Listen, it's nice to have a title, but with the title comes real responsibilities. And if you don't understand that, you shouldn't be holding the position. It's that simple. So this wasn't just the ramblings or the rantings of a college kid. She did this after October 7th, and she glorified and endorsed on over 70 pieces of social media the October 7th savagery of Hamas.
Including the rapes.
The murders, the tortures.
Condoned.
She condoned this. So, and when Mondami, to his disgrace and discredit, says, well, she's a private citizen. Now, she's not a private citizen. She's the First Lady of New York. And you have over 1 million Jewish people in this city. And you don't have to be Jewish to be angered by this endorsement of terrorism and violence. And so she's not a private citizen. And what this mayor has not done is to set her straight and to repudiate this. An answer that she's just a private citizen, it's a lovely life, doesn't mean no good. There's no citizen that this man, for the next 3.5 years, will govern fairly and protect all the communities of the city.
And if I might add, Your Honor, if this is what he's going to tolerate from her, it's only a prelude of what we, the citizenry, are going to tolerate from both of them in the next 2 years, 3 years, and 9 months of his 4-year term. I get the feeling there's going to be a really, really ugly ending to this scenario. I hope you agree.
I think you're absolutely right. I guess we have to take a break.
Yes.
We'll take the break. We'll be back in about a few moments. As I say on my show, Let the Record Show, we'll be back in a few moments with more important and interesting conversation. Please stay with Governor Patterson and myself. Thank you.
The Left versus the Right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Left versus the Right. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on The Left versus the Right.
With two centrist Democrats.
And some unneeded interruptions that we were able to remove while we were having the commercials. And I would say on Thursday morning, Your Honor, I went to the Association for Better New York. Governor Kathy Hochul spoke, and she was talking about bringing individuals who have gone and moved to Florida back to New York. And she laid out what her terms would be, or the enticement to get people to come back. I don't think they're coming back, Your Honor.
What were the enticements, Governor?
The property taxes she wanted to lower. She wanted to make the schools safer. Platitudes that are on lists that every major figure reads when they speak to a large audience, but nothing that sounded like a plan. And I don't mean to be critical of the governor, but if you're going to jump into that kind of discussion, you can't just rattle off ideas that you might have memorized. You've got to explain to the audience why you think your idea will work. I'm not saying her idea can't work. I'm just saying she didn't outline it to, I think, the satisfaction of the people who heard her the other day.
Well, I think we call it in the law business enhanced degree of specificity.
Yeah.
And that's what apparently lacked. I didn't go to that breakfast. I was invited, but I was doing other things, so I missed it. But let's set the record straight.
And who better
to set the record straight
then let the record show than yourself?
Thank you. So the record is very simple. When you have left-wing radical socialist policies, over-taxation, over-regulation, an attack on free markets, mandated rent controls, which only harm the supply of housing, and then you say you don't have enough housing. When you want to raise minimum wages so that small business people can afford to stay in business, or if they can survive in business, they have to fire half their staffs. So much for job creation. You have a series of obsessions in the body politique, which have nothing to do with being grounded in reality about how people live, what makes people productive, what encourages people to save, invest, and to stay here. And there's a reason that we've lost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the last number of years, and in the last 10 years, way over 1 million people from New York. And we lose congressional representation because of the loss of population, which means you have less clout in Washington. And where are the people fleeing from? They're fleeing from California and New York and Illinois. What do they all have in common? They all have in common radical left legislatures, radical left governors, radical left mayors, no public safety, no law and order, diminished quality of life, homeless on the streets, uncared for, spreading disease that we haven't seen since the Middle Ages. We're overtaxed. We're overregulated. Is there any wonder people flee? They vote with their feet and they go to more enticing surroundings like Florida, like the Carolinas, like Texas. That's what happens. People, if they can afford to leave, will leave. Now, Kathy Hochul, to her credit, has finally realized, or one of her staffers has explained to her, that people are voting with their feet, and you need them because they're the tax base. When you replace the productive class, the people who support the charities, the hospitals, the cultural institutions, the businesses, pay the taxes, create the jobs, create the services, when you have those people fleeing and they're replaced by the free lunch crowd, the people who just want handouts and be maintained by taxation of other people's money, then what do you expect is going to happen? So she wants everybody to come back. And she said, and I read about the speech, she said, and she was interviewed on television, she said, I want the millionaires to go to Palm Beach and tell their friends to come back to New York. Well, why, as you correctly say, Governor, why would they ever come back? There's no reason to come back when you can have a better quality of life and a safer quality of life with no taxes in Florida. In Florida, there's no such thing as income tax. I mean, really? No income tax? And what does Mondami want to do? He wants to raise the corporate tax. So that'll destroy businesses and jobs and services and tax base. He wants to raise the income tax. That'll encourage people to flee. Now, he has another brilliant idea. He wants to take the estate tax, where there's a $7 million exemption, which means that first $7 million can't be touched by state government. Remember, there's already a federal estate tax.
Right.
So in the state of New York, first $7 million is exempt from state taxation, which means you can pass this on to your children or your grandchildren if you die in the domain, if you don't sell. Okay, and they're able to inherit that property, and that the price at the time, the value of the property at the time, it becomes the basis under the income tax laws. So you don't have to pay taxes on it. It's exempt. That keeps people encouraged to stay. So he wants to, Mondami, this foolish young man, he wants to take that $7 million exemption, take it down to $750,000, which means anybody who owns a co-op or a condo or a single-family home
is going to pay taxes.
He's going to have to pay taxes on it, and they don't have the taxes. When they pay taxes, they'll have to sell. That'll be good for the economy, right?
So he's resubmitting what the federal government was doing anyway, and the state tried to help its citizens by negating it to a certain degree.
Right.
Because there's a big difference between $7 million and $750,000.
One would
and then he
think.
comes in and wants to put it back the way it was before.
Right, and $750,000. And by the way, you go down from $7 million to $750,000, Governor, and then he wants to tax it at a rate of 50%. So get this straight. You're telling people, stay here, and we're literally going to tax you to death. So you can't afford to live here.
One for you, one for us.
Right. It's much more fair, comrade. So you can't afford to live here, but you also can't afford to die here. And no wonder people are fleeing and going to other more hospitable domains. Of course they'll leave. Everything should be done to keep the tax base in place. I'll tell you the following anecdote. This was my first week on the job as a general counsel, city counsel, chief counsel to the speaker, Peter Vallone. And a fellow comes into the office to see Peter Vallone. And Peter and I have been working on some matters in the speaker's office. And the fellow who came in was Ken Lipper, who had been deputy mayor.
Him.
You know Ken. He'd been deputy mayor under Ed Koch for finance.
Yeah, sure.
And he's also, by the way, the author of and the producer for the movie Wall Street. Brilliant financial expert.
Really?
Yeah, that was Ken Lipper's. Well, the movie Wall Street, Michael Douglas, that was Ken Lipper's. So Lipper and I are sitting on the couch next to each other. I've just been introduced, and I didn't know Lipper at all. And Peter Vallone had to take a phone call. So Lipper leans over to me and says, let me ask you the following question. I said, yes, sir. What's the question? He says, what does it mean that 100,000 households pay half the personal income tax in the city of New York? I said, is that really true? He says, believe me, I'm a numbers guy. That's true. I said, well, to me, that means you have a very precarious economic base, and you should be doing everything possible to hold those people here and to try to increase that number from 100,000 to make it 200,000. You should do whatever is necessary to enhance that tax base. So Peter Vallone gets off the phone, and Lipper says to Peter, he says, you just hired yourself a smart lawyer. And I thanked him very much for that endorsement.
How about that?
So years later, I'm teaching local government law at Cardozo Law School as an adjunct professor. And the first day of the class, I say, let me ask you a question to the class. What does it mean that there are 100,000 households that pay half the personal income tax? And they raise their hand. I call on a number of people, and they say, oh, it's unfair. We need to redistribute the wealth. It's terrible that they have this concentration of wealth. One guy in the back raised his hand. He says, I disagree with that. I said, what's your opinion, sir? He says, I think you have to increase the numbers who are your tax base and do everything you can to encourage them to stay and to bring more people in. I said, sir, what's your name? And he says, John Smith. I said, Mr. Smith, I said, I'm very happy that you're here in this class. You never have to come back here if you don't want to, because you just earned your A.
Wow. Oh.
But that was common sense. But yet the multitude in the class kept thinking about redistribution of wealth. Pretty soon, as Margaret Thatcher correctly pointed out, you run out of other people's money to tax and grab.
Yeah. Yeah. And she admired President Reagan and vice versa, because they really saw the economic situation in their respective countries very similarly and are still celebrated for it. It wasn't clear when she first came in where she was coming from, but she cleared that up in the first few months.
Now, she was a remarkable woman. And you're a student of history, Governor. There's an interesting question that historians and political science types debate. One is the so-called great man or great person theory in history, that history is made by somebody who's a very big force and moves events in such a direction that the world has changed because of that. That's one theory. And examples of that is Churchill in England, or Thatcher in England, or Roosevelt in the United States, or Lincoln in the United States, or even Teddy Roosevelt in the United States. That's an example of that theory. The other theory is all people do is respond to what's going on in the world, and they're to be judged by how they respond to it. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that the ability to respond when something happens is, I think, what divides the good leaders from the great leaders. Not sitting around waiting for something to happen before you start figuring out how you're going to address it. If anything, anticipating what the problems might be, whether they be economic, social confrontation, issues involving education policy, whatever they are. I've always thought that the ones who would attack the issue, I don't mean attacking the problem, but the issue itself, are the ones who history doesn't record the people who wait around to see what's going to happen.
Well, in that regard, let me raise the following issue. There was an industrial revolution. It happened. It changed the way people lived. There are opportunities for moving up in society, to have a quality of life, to take care of their children, to have so-called progress. A lot of people lost their jobs and their livelihood because of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
You had the whole Luddite movement that went into the factories and tried to destroy the machinery because they thought that would stymie this radical social change. It was social change, it was economic change. It was both social wide as well as personal impacts. And change has gotten quicker, David, much quicker today than ever before. Everything is on a fast time frame. And the newest phenomena, which I'm very concerned about, and frankly, being someone who's not sophisticated in technology, but I do read about it, is this so-called AI phenomenon that's going on. And the fear is that that's going to make a lot of human beings' positions in society and economically at risk, because they will literally be replaced by this new technology, this artificial intelligent technology. And that's a very important issue, how we respond to that. And it's particularly important because based on, again, what I've read, I don't have personal knowledge of this, Governor, there's a battle for the future of civilization, and that's really going to be between the United States and China. And the battle for civilization between the United States and China may fall out in terms of winners and losers, who controls, who's ahead of the AI game. And right now, again, based on what I've read, China is on the momentum and we're not. What are your thoughts?
I think they are logarithmically ahead of everybody. And they have worked very hard on that without the best intentions. In other words, they're not doing this to try to make the world a better place to live in, and we better get that real quickly while we still can. It was interesting, at the breakfast the other day, the AI kept disrupting the governor's speech. In other words, she was trying to play some information they'd recorded. She tried to play it for the audience, and AI kept rearranging it. And it was stunning. And it wasn't her fault or the technology's fault or anything like that. It was just a very, it's a very potentially productive but inherently dangerous project that we're looking at. Your Honor, I want to thank you on very short notice for coming in and joining me on The Left versus the Right. It wouldn't have been the same without you, although I've been known to talk to myself for hours. And
we can always get a robot to have a conversation.
Yes, and just hope that we'll be hearing you shortly here on Let the Record Show on WABC in New York. I'm David Patterson, and Your Honor, thanks for joining us.
It's always a pleasure being with you, Governor. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?